Hello and welcome to this discussion from For the Region about the decarbonisation of our buildings and green construction. We are delighted to have some local thought leaders in the room with us this afternoon, and we're really talking about this central question that we considered at the Green Recovery Conference a few weeks ago, asking how could Swansea lead the way in green construction and the decarbonisation of our buildings. The Swansea Green Recovery Business Conference met a few weeks ago, bringing together businesses and organisations and people from across the city and county of Swansea in particular to talk about what needs to happen across Swansea for us all to embrace new forms of energy, new forms of building, new ways of managing our buildings to decarbonise the existing building stock and make sure that any new construction is much greener, and to really address and explore some of the big challenges and obstacles and of course opportunities to make that happen. So we're picking up that discussion again today with a few local businesses and organisations who have great expertise in all of this. And the first thing we'll do this afternoon is invite those partners to introduce themselves to us all. So I'll start by asking Chris Bailey from Specific to say hello. Specific were the sponsor of the buildings area at the Green Recovery Business Conference. Chris, thanks for joining us. Please introduce yourself and your project.
Thanks, Dawn. Chris Bailey, Business Development Manager at Specific IKC. So we're an innovation and knowledge centre based at Swansea University, led by Swansea University. And our mission is really to help transition buildings into what we call active buildings and encourage that design ethos in buildings by utilising otherwise sort of forgotten parts of a building, typically your facades and obviously the roof, for generation, making sure that those buildings can store that energy, time shift it, and then release it in an efficient manner as part of a kind of a whole system approach, and in order basically to provide heating, power, and also transportation energy, i.e. EVs, be that e-bikes, cars, or other means.
So Chris, Specific is within Swansea University. It's a resource and an information centre for businesses and organisations that want to explore these new technologies. Do you support businesses in deploying different solutions in building projects?
Absolutely. Part of the way Specific is funded allows us to be able to work with SMEs across Wales and the UK to provide access to our facilities, our demonstrator buildings, and our expertise across the different research areas that we work in. So be that solar PV, building energy systems, battery storage, solar thermal, and the heat storage side of things, including interseasonal heat storage, and then looking at the data that comes from all of those systems and how do you collect it and use it efficiently to create, say, visualizations or energy dashboards and things like that actually put the power of decision-making processes, informed decision-making processes, back into the user's hands. And we aim for things like never having uncontrolled export from a building, for instance. So we're always looking to make a decision about where our energy is either coming from or going to.
Great. Thank you, Chris. So that's a really valuable resource for any businesses across the region who are looking to increase their understanding and knowledge around all of this. I'd love to come next to Dave Keith from RD Group. Dave, introduce yourself. You work on so many of these things and run a number of great local businesses. What's your take on how best we can decarbonise our buildings?
Hi, Dawn, and thanks very much. Hello, everybody. Chris, we've worked with Specific for many years. We gave you microgrid capabilities via our Schneider partnership to allow you to look at the export of your power into microgrids, and we're doing your battery energy storage system at this moment in time. I'm lucky enough in our group of businesses, the Raven Delta Group, which looks at innovation technology and the next generation of what's coming, not what's here, on a global basis. And we've just set up some collaboration agreements with Swansea University, which are now global, and we're bringing projects to the university to look at. Most of that in the construction sector with advanced materials, decarbonisation of concrete, 3D building printing, and all sorts of things, and every technology that goes with it. A big problem is, and sorry, Chris, to be against what you said earlier, is value engineering, because it's not value engineering usually, it's devalue engineering. It is not looking at OPEX, it's looking at CAPEX. And the sooner the local authorities and every other investor can look at whole life cycle values, not just the CAPEX of building it, the better. The way that our industry is doing that is we're offering to lease services completely, multi-million-pound leases over the duration of a lifetime of a building. So you know exactly what your operational costs are going to be for the whole of the building life. And that also takes away the risk from the building owner in relation to those systems, because they remain the responsibility of the person who's leasing it. So you've got a fixed cost for the duration of the lifetime of the building. That also allows you to upgrade those buildings at times when new technologies come in and adjust your lease accordingly to take advantage of the latest technologies. So the construction sector needs to change completely. The way that it's been driven over the last 20 or 30 years is completely against innovation. It is about that CAPEX all the time. Local authorities, everybody, value engineering, I'm sorry, isn't value engineering. You have to have an enlightened client. That client has to understand the full life cycle values, the local authorities especially. Because if you're a one-off client and you're a developer just building a building and then selling it on, that's up to you. But with a local authority and with the government buildings, they are tied into them for the life cycle. They are tied into them for the maintenance for that duration. And nobody is valuing that. Everybody looks at how can we cut this CAPEX instead of where can we attract, which there are lots of funds available globally as well as in the UK to assist you in ensuring that OPEX of your building value. You can actually borrow money at special rates to allow you to do so. Everyone just looks at how can we get this CAPEX down? What can we cut out? I'm involved with BREEAM, DREAM, every other initiative that you can think of. We design these buildings to the latest things. And the first thing that happens is a construction company comes on board. Right, what can we cut? What can we get rid of? We've got to reduce this budget. That is not the way to value our buildings in the future.
Thanks, Dave. Strong words there about the importance of not value engineering out all the good stuff that's incorporated in the design and management of new buildings. And you mentioned enlightened clients. So I'd like to come to Elvid Roberts from Pobl. Elvid, is Pobl an enlightened client when it comes to building decarbonised buildings?
I work for Pobl. We're a large housing association. We've got about 18,000 existing homes that we are responsible for retaining for in perpetuity. And so obviously we do think everyone and nobody are quite strong words there. I think Pobl and organisations like ours certainly do and are starting to put our money where our mouth is when it comes to thinking about the whole life cost of a building. So yeah, I mentioned we have 18,000 homes, all of which will need to be retrofitted within the next decade. Myself, I'm head of sustainability and innovation, which is, I suppose, a job title that marks the fact that Pobl is very interested in this space. Every minute of my working day is thinking about ways to improve the way we build things. Sometimes I'm banging my head against a brick wall, and at the highest possible levels, I've been encouraged to apply new ways of thinking. So the good news is, Pobl are currently actively building 2 schemes in Swansea, which is utilising the Innovation Housing Programme, biophilic living right in the city centre, and Gwynfain further afield close to Gorsine and Loughor. And both those schemes are enormously important, not just from a Swansea point of view, but from the Wales and UK point of view, where we're innovating, albeit using additional funding, but actually building examples. And I think that's one of the best ways that Swansea can lead the way, is by talking about its examples whilst they're in construction, allowing people to see, demystify what new ways of building actually involve. When people have moved in, hopefully marketing the views, or the positive views, I hope, and listening to the problems of people who have moved into homes that are very low carbon in their aspirations. Beyond, I would like to say that, beyond the schemes that have received innovation, we haven't stood still. By now, we're signing off on all new projects, not just in Swansea, but across our area. So we build around 700 to 1,000 homes a year. Many of those are utilising government grant. So obviously need to achieve EPCA and be off gas. But we're going way beyond that, because we want to address whole life carbon, because some of those metrics don't just quite allow you to be able to measure the full benefit of building performance. We're now adopted as a standard for all our new projects going forward, sort of a fabric first low carbon standard, which we will seek to improve as we go through our sort of short, medium and long-term journey towards zero carbon. So our board, our investment committee fully recognise that investing more, if a project isn't viable, but it's actually going to help us meet zero carbon, our own zero carbon standards, and actually avoid having to rather stupidly sort of retrofit new builds in about 10 years. I think we're already prepared to invest more into those homes to make sure that they meet the standard that we've set for ourselves. And I think we'll also at Gwynfaine be able to build low carbon homes for sale. You know, anybody can buy one. The scheme is 144 homes, and there's a home for everyone there, I'd like to think. But we're also exploring not just around energy and carbon, but very heavily exploring things like green infrastructure, which is self-evident in biophilic living, which is an urban block of apartments as part of a mixed-use scheme, which has got sort of an urban farm on the roof as well, and right in the city centre on Oxford Street. But we're also exploring the use of a green roof, for example, on a scheme we're currently constructing just off Walter Road, using funding from the Places for Nature Fund. So we don't want to just do these things, but we want to talk about them. We want to show and maybe give some leadership and inspire others to follow suit.
Thanks, Elvid. Yes, I think you've mentioned the Welsh Government's innovative housing programme, which provides that kind of gap funding that enables this kind of really innovative leadership from housing associations and others. And really important message that you've shared there about the importance of celebrating and talking about the really great examples that do exist, and the importance of demystifying that and perhaps opening the doors to some of those projects to smaller contractors and smaller developers to really come and see and take the risk and take some of the unknowns out of building differently. We've got Gareth Evans in the room from the Construction Wales Innovation Centre, which is housed within the University of Wales Trinity St David. Gareth, what's your take on all of this?
Thank you, Dawn. Yeah, it's really interesting, actually. I suppose from our perspective, we focus on application of the technologies and application of processes into industry and support industry and academia to adopt the new practices and processes and sort of and deliver these mechanisms through collaborations. I think collaboration is key in this area to really effectively deliver the outcomes we need. Industry and academia, we have two academic institutions in the room. We have a large amount of industry in the room as well. Our collaboration is critical to see the success of this moving forward. And whether that be knowledge transfer opportunities, whether that be showcasing these opportunities to further education, higher education students, because these are the learners of the future, are the industry of the future. So we need to make sure that education is sort of set up and teed up, ready to sort of embrace not only now but in the future what holds for us. We've been working a lot, on the collaboration side, and some of the areas that we've been focusing in on retrofit being one, and technologies. Specifically, we've just launched a project with Zero that actually showcases a lot of the technologies being demonstrated in optimized retrofit projects, and that transportable module will be enabled with not only the community but also the educational sector and industry alike. So showcasing the tech that gets installed, and as mentioned earlier, Dave mentioned, I think demystifying what it looks like. We're also sort of very closely working on the envelope element as well, where we're collaborating again with Wood Knowledge Wales. So we've created a strong collaboration with Wood Knowledge Wales in the view of Welsh timber and Welsh timber products in the sector. We need to be more resilient. I think in this time we're showing ourselves here now. There are so many pressure points on materials and lead times because we're waiting for materials to come from all around the world. Why can't we be more resilient and use some material that's sort of maybe a little bit closer to home? yeah, we may need to look at some innovation to sort of make make the product work. But I think, that's where sort of academic institutions like ourselves and Swansea can sort of, can come to the fore and support industry then to sort of embed, these sort of, more sustainable practices and hybrid practices, because, timber and Welsh timber is not going to be the solution for, for it all. We're going to have to embrace other elements to sort of jettison in and support that. So yeah, we've been very much focused on skills, knowledge, and that knowledge transfer between industry and academia.
Thanks, Gareth. Yeah, that's really, really interesting to hear about what you're doing in bringing industry and students together. I'd like to hear a bit more about that a little bit later on. Thanks for that, Gareth. Jane, let's hear from a woman's voice. Thanks very much for joining us, Jane.
Okay, so I'm Jane and I work with Alun Griffiths, Civil Engineering Construction. So we've had quite a number of schemes, in the Swansea, in the outlying area, and my region is across South West Wales, although I am involved in the construction of the new Dyfi Bridge at the moment in Machynlleth, so quite an interesting portfolio of work. So we do anything but building, so I'm quite relieved. I'm here very much today to learn, but as a company, we too are very keen and committed to all the sustainability, carbon, and the agenda that we're discussing here today. So Griffiths have revisited the sustainability strategy, and we're hoping that our strategy looking forward to 2030 will go live at the end of the month. But we're also, Griffiths is owned by Tarmac and ultimately by CRH. So we are at the cutting edge of developments of anything that in terms of tarmac, cement, specialists in the field and all of that. So yeah, come to this today with sort of lots of different aspects of it. And as I say, to learn from others really. But I think, we're asked to sort of what would be the big challenge for me. I'm just feeling a bit old because, this is stuff that I've discussed probably 20 years ago, and, Welsh timber, all of these things, modulars come and whatever else. And I can some other people nodding heads there, because for me, what we don't want to do is reinvent the wheel. So we'll be talking about new networks and talking about more sharing stuff. Well, really, I'm sorry, I don't want to be critical of Welsh Government by any means, but really, yes, we want private sector to lead. Yes, there's obviously clear role here for public sector clients and all of that discussion. But ultimately, why is there now not a one-stop shop for due to be an old-fashioned term for all this stuff? So take on board, lots of people are involved here to learn, but that would be my wish list really, was to have a one-stop shop where all this stuff gets in, and other people, whether it's somebody that wants to put in a hydro scheme at the side of their house in a field to a stream, or whether it's one of these massive schemes that could actually pick up that information. So that's me. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Really appreciate you being here today and sort of giving over the views of, I'm sure, a lot to the people that will watch this meeting when we put it out online, that lots of people will be saying the same sort of things and be interested in hearing people's advice. Nigel, can I come to you?
Good afternoon. So I'm Nigel Phillips. I'm the operations manager for Kier Construction across South Wales. So we build everything other than spec housing, from 2 million up to 60 million. So we're very much at the, I'll call it the blunt end of the operation. I think from listening through this, Dave Keefe may be surprised to know that I really dislike value engineering. Value engineering is not a term that really describes what it is. As Dave said, value engineering bears no relation to the building, the operation of the building, the purpose of the building. It is purely a commercial exercise to get within a client's perceived budget set by a cost planner at some point in time. So kind of the beginning point of this journey for me is that there needs to be a little bit more education in the professional team. So in the PQSs, the cost planners, the architects and the engineers, both mechanical, electrical and structural. A lot of what I'm building now is still the same as I was building 20 years ago. There's been no change. Some of the schemes I see that are supposed to be sustainable are supposed to be, in theory, using cutting edge technology. I learned about 20 years ago. There are a real problem with some of our consultants, I'll just use a general term, in that we're still using old-fashioned engineering. We're still coming at it from an old-fashioned design point of view. All of the stuff that's picked up from CWIC in terms of fabric first, all the stuff that comes from specific in terms of building integrated technologies and all of that, that doesn't hit the real world, I'm afraid to say. So we'll do the odd building. So we helped build the active classroom with Specific quite a while ago now. And at that point in time, I was really hopeful that that would springboard some of those technologies into everyday construction. I'm still seeing buildings that I haven't started to build yet, but I know I'm putting plant on PV on the roof, and it'll be a raised seam roof. And I know building integrated technology works there and is probably more efficient, but it's all led from the consultants, and ultimately it's all led from the cost plan that's agreed with the client in the first place. So as Dave said, somebody needs to be a bit more forward thinking in terms of CapEx, OpEx. All of the cutting and the VE that we do is primarily around CapEx. There are still barriers between organisations internally in terms of the project department and the FM, the maintenance, the operations department. In the two cannot mix budgets. They cannot talk to each other. They cannot offset a construction saving, if you like, or a construction expense that would save them in the 25-year timescale a larger amount of money. So from a slightly controversial point of view, I build what other people give me to build. I'd like other people to actually give me the opportunity to build new, innovative buildings using local materials based on new technology. At this point in time, I'd settle for using some fairly well-known technology. Again, comes back to CapEx costs. That's probably enough for me.
Thanks, Nigel. Oh,
probably not what you were expecting from a main contractor.
Yeah, that's all a little bit depressing to hear, isn't it? You know, when we've got Gareth from University of Wales Trinity St David talking about the ambitions of the university, and Chris as well with the ambitions of the specific project. It's really quite depressing to hear that you don't feel that we're moving forward in any way, shape or form. Is it about the knowledge of consultants like engineers and architects then? Is it the client?
I believe so. Gareth's nodding his head there. So to be fair, the client just sets the budget. The budget, you can make the budget fit whatever you want the budget to fit, whether you have less square meters or one less floor, whatever. If the ambition is to be sustainable and zero energy, then the architects and the engineers, both structural and mechanical, electrical, need to be on board with what they're going to do right at the very beginning, at that very concept stage. There's no point coming to me at stage 4 design with a big concrete frame with SFS and zinc cladding and tell me I want to be zero carbon and I want to be sustainable. You've already probably spent more than £500,000 in terms of design fees by the time you get to me. It needs to be at that concept stage. And perhaps some of the clients, listened to Alvid earlier, was refreshing. Majority of what we build is public money. The clients need to be more informed as well. So there is an education piece, and I know people like Gareth and Specific work very hard, and there are people that are on this call that know about it, but your run-of-the-mill architects, engineers and all that, as I said, still seem to be running on 20-year-old technology. So there is a massive education piece to be done for me.
Yeah, thanks, Nigel. I think we'll explore a little bit more of that now as we go forward. Let me just get Dom to introduce himself as well. Hi, Dom. Welcome.
Hi, Zoe. Thank you. Yes, so I work for Glanmor Chartered Surveyors. So we are commercial property consultants, mainly based in Swansea. So our involvement is typically sort of at the start of these sort of processes in identifying sites, and then perhaps towards more the end with identifying occupiers, specifically commercial for these sites. So I am actually here on an educational journey myself, actually. So part of my role is to sort of have a bit more knowledge about this, to involve at the early stages, and then especially for the occupier identification at the end of these sort of developments, to work on exactly what we need to do to satisfy these requirements. So I think it's definitely changing and will force the construction period to change more radically, is that end occupiers are being more educated in this area. So certain, especially more national occupiers, whether it be office, retail or industrial, are sort of putting more key interest and also the sort of the key decision making of where they need to go is very much based on the sort of carbon or sort of energy effects of what the performance of the building is going to be like. So I think it's going to be more and more important for developers to take that on board anyway, whether they want to or they have to. So yeah, so my position here is to get my education on board. I act for more sort of, I'd say, private investors, stakeholders in the city centre who are both sort of freeholders currently or looking to be developers in the city centre. So currently, you might hear the background of mine. I don't know if you can hear it, but there's one going on next door to me in Prince's House. So there's a key interest to sort of get on board with this quite quickly, and at the early stages as well. So a one-stop shop that Jane mentioned would be ideal, just for sort of ease of accessing that education as well, to sort of make it as sort of smooth and streamlined as possible. So yeah, here on an educational basis.
Thank you, Dom, and thanks for joining us. Dom, are your clients talking to you about these sort of issues?
Not essentially, because it normally comes in the second phase of discussion with your likes of the construction experts, with likes of the architects, etc. But I think it's important for people who do what I do to understand more. So it's more when we're identifying sites, it is a key sort of factor into it, and also the knowledge we act for occupiers as well in identifying site release, and having more knowledge as to what they should be requiring, what they should be expecting, is only going to help really in encouraging, again, developers to make sure that they are ticking all those boxes. So yeah, I think we need to, as my profession personally, we need to know more in the process as well as other sort of professions as well.
Thanks, Dom. Thanks, Dave.
There's a couple of things there, and Nigel, it's very, very refreshing, and Elvid, very refreshing as well. Obviously, from Elvid's point of view, we design the houses of tomorrow, mainly with private developers who are buying into the well-being of future generations, because the well-being component brings decarbonisation and energy saving and performance as a holistic approach rather than in isolation. And also in Wales, there's a very, very disjointed. People are doing lots of things in isolation, and people don't see what other people are doing. And it's very much, I don't understand why it's in Wales, because elsewhere I work, it's not like that. But in Wales, everybody seems to be, and I'm doing this and I'm doing that, rather than sharing it to the bigger picture. A quick scenario of where we bring best value. From an engineering perspective, we undertook recently a £250 million project, construction build, where the client at the early stages asked us for opportunities of innovation and technology. We explained that the only way we could bring that was being involved with the construction design phase, not be given a box and say, what can you do with this? It's too late. We're given the U values, we're given the performance of the building. That's no good to us. We need to be involved with the architects at the stages of construction and explain to them what we can do with that building if they can achieve this particular performance. So it's about integrated teams, understanding what the end goals are and understanding what we're all trying to achieve. With this particular project, which was a large project, I put the proposal, or my team put a proposal forward to spend £500,000 more on the building services. At that point in time, you can imagine what the answer was. At the end of the day, as a developer, when we finish this, we'd be selling it to a pension company, and they'd only value it per so much per square foot, so we wouldn't get the money back. Cut the long story short, the developer decided, rather than build it to sell, they were going to build it to run themselves for a period of time and then sell it. So what I did was, or what we did as a team, we put a proposal forward to spend that additional money, which they did. There's £560,000 more on the services, but we give them a guarantee that over a 3-year period, they would save that money on the performance of their building. Plus we underwrote it. But also what happened was, when they did, after 3.5 years, sell that building, because we had the evidence of the performance of the building, they had a 12% uplift on the value of the sale, because they could demonstrate how that building was performing in relation to others. Now that is an envisioned client, which are very, very few and far between. But you've got to, and what we're doing as an industry is trying to get the amount of people I meet who say, I wish I'd met you 3 years ago when I was building my building, because I was led by 5 construction companies into value engineering. I saved £3 million, but now I have to do it all again. Because they didn't take those life cycle values into account. So it is about, as Nigel and everybody is saying, it's about getting that client on board, getting them to understand those values, and getting them to take the brave step of saying, we will spend £1 million more because we're going to save 3 million in 15 years. Yeah. But somebody has got to break that mold. As an industry, we're meeting surveyors in London and all over the country who have been brought up in this horrible value engineering, beat the subcontractor down, valueless method of our construction. And we've got to change it. How? I say it's a breakdown of, it's about informing people, making them aware and showing them those values. And like Dom and others, it's about demonstrating to them at the stages they're designing, people need to be working all to the same goal.
Thanks so much, Dave. It's great to hear a live example about those cost savings and performance enhancements. Thanks so much for that. Elfed.
Hiya, yeah, thanks. I just want to pick up on a few of the things that have the themes discussed. I would say that the way we now work on a new project is completely different from the way we used to work 5 years ago. I'm currently working on 2 big schemes on SA1, and we get in the M&E services engineers involved pre-planning concept stage. You know, we have set our ambitions regarding carbon and fuel poverty. Those 2 things are extremely important to Pobl. The idea that everybody's going through a crisis at the moment, but certainly people living in the homes that we developed on low incomes are really, we really need to put them at the fore of our thinking. So this kind of like capex kind of like attitude of the past is certainly doesn't ring with me now. We're completely different the way we work. We did try to work with the contractor. I think procurement, traditional procurement regulations or competition rules generally mean that you end up working with a contractor at a much later stage in the process than you ideally need to be doing. To turn that around, we were working with a local company in Ebbw Vale on 2 innovative projects in Newport, unfortunately, and the whole idea was that they were an off-site manufacturing company specializing in timber and modular, and we were working with them from absolute sort of blank sheet of paper to design houses designed for manufacture, so we could get all the advantages of off-site manufacturing, air tightness, use of timber, but to do that in a way that absolutely harnessed the construction methodology and the expertise of the manufacturer, the constructor. Unfortunately, they went into administration. So that these are, I think, I'll say an example. These are quite trying times. At the same time as we're trying to sort of transform the way we build, we are now being hit by an almost equal and opposite force of market economics, materials pricing going through the roof. Lack of skills being affected by things like COVID or Brexit, if I could dare to mention that. There are forces that we're trying to sort of fight, but nevertheless we're fighting it. On the knowledge sharing side, I mentioned in the chat, a very new idea to me, but I recently got involved as part of the steering group for something called the Welsh Zero Carbon Performance Hub. It's a bit of a long-winded title, so they're calling it Hub with a W in the middle. The idea is that it is very much kind of public driven, so maybe that needs to be improved in the future. But they've got 3 years of funding from Welsh Government. The whole idea is to get a partner that will accelerate learning, share it, undertake valuable studies, build portals, provide an A to Z of the sustainability supply chain, give everybody access to it, put good practice and bad practice examples, gather all the good and bad ways that have been people have been trying to sort of build innovation schemes. I think it's 64 innovation schemes across Wales. Every single authority's got one. We need to know what's happened. What did people's bills come down? What worked best? What didn't? So we can all start to sort of make more informed choices about moving forward, and to do so using the Welsh supply chain. So there are lots of good ideas going on. I really believe this hub thing will help to answer some of the desire there is out there of people saying, surely everybody else is trying to do the same thing, but who's sharing the information? So I think I'm impatient. I am very impatient. I want this yesterday. Unfortunately, we can't really have it until the end of the year, but it's being worked on. I want to reassure people.
Thanks, Eldred. You brought up some, I mean, really interesting points in terms of getting people involved from the development process from the start. That's something we've heard for years and years. And as you know, from the whole, as you've mentioned, the barrier of the procurement process, you know, if we understand who our local supply chain is, and we understand what everyone is able to provide and get them involved in that very early stage, you're absolutely right. That would be a really, really key point. On evaluation, understanding the evaluation of these projects and initiatives, where, as you've mentioned about shouting about different things and celebrating things, where do we see that? Where do we hear about those things? Showcasing the learnings from the whole system, skills is again a key topic. Dave, I know you're chomping to come in, but just as Gareth had his hand up.
So it is, like you said, really enlightening to hear sort of, you know, a lot of contractors, you know, around the room saying sort of similar challenges, setting down, especially client knowledge, consultant knowledge. You know, I've seen that really recently on a project that we've been intimately involved in. And, you know, there's that big CapEx versus OpEx discussion. And, you know, for me, the attitude that I say, and you know, the way it's kicking the can down the road, you know, that's the sort of, you know, the way that I term it. And I think for the region, we've missed a strong opportunity as well. You know, again, I'm not being critical of any funders, but you know, there's a significant amount of funding that being given to, being sort of, you know, dished out over the last number of years, and if I be honest, the only one that's really developed any sort of data from it, and performance data and effectiveness, is optimized retrofit. Before that, even through even through sort of the various tranches and the last tranche of funding through the Swansea City deal, you know, there are projects here in Swansea City in the region that should be delivered to a minimum standard. Those projects are not being delivered to a minimum standard because there's no requirement to deliver. So, you know, I just see that as a slight sort of, you know, backward step. Really, we should be you know, sort of, you know, where there is public funding, other nations have done this. So Scotland in particular have embedded this methodology where there's public funding. You know, there needs to be innovation, there needs to be and data is a key element of this. And actually, how are these buildings performing? Are they building? And if they're not performing, let's learn from them for the next time. So, you know, it's so yeah, there's sort of a big discussion there, and you know, I see the Welsh Government have sort of got it right through optimised retrofit. You know, it's not perfect, but you know, it is starting to work. You know, the innovative housing programme, you know, as good as it was, and there's many sort of, you know, amazing projects with social housing providers that have delivered. There's very little learning from it. You know, we don't know if half the projects have actually delivered what they say they were going to do. So, you know, there's a lot of monitoring going on, and you know, it's interesting. You know, Elfed picked up, you know, design for manufacture. We need, you know, clients need to be involved from the outset. Clients really need to change the mindset in terms of the performance of buildings rather than it being measured on the quality of a building. For me now, my mindset would be the performance of a building. A high performing building, an efficient building generally is a good quality building, because, you know, if everything else fails, you know, the building's not going to perform. So, you know, it maybe there's again another mindset shift there to say, well, actually, look, you know, part of defects period should be your energy calculations. Are they telling us, you know, are they realistic? Are they actually, you know, not 5 times, you know, the energy usage in the first year than it was supposed to be? You know, that type of element. So, you know, but it's also designed for manufacture and deconstruction. There's a circular economy element here as well, and it was picked up earlier. You know, we design buildings now; they have a life. So, you know, part of our sort of carbon consideration needs to be that whole life of what we can do with these buildings. And there's interesting things being done around steel leasing, and rather than having, you know, purchasing products, looking at what we can do with them, recycling them after, you know, 50 years down the line when the building comes redundant, we need to, you know, recycle it. But let's put a plan in now, potentially, where we could be. So yeah, there's, you know, education. I think, you know, the key here is education, awareness raising, there's been a lot of work around the skills. element, so I've seen amazing work with the FE colleges from skills perspective, green skills, a lot of, lower level, but skills-based training. What we haven't done is seen a lot of sort of support and funding put into the higher level, which is where Nigel picked up, the professional level, where in many cases where the decisions are made, but by the time it gets to an electrician or plumber, it's too late. It needs to be the architects, the specifiers, and the clients need to be the ones that are well informed as well. So yeah, really interesting.
Thank you, Gareth. Dave.
Yeah, sorry, Chris, going back to something you said at the early start about engineers, understanding technologies and joined up, etc., etc. The one thing we have to be careful of, and particularly in relation to value, engineers that actually are capable of doing those things, are more expensive. They're highly trained, but still the model drives. Hang on, I want an engineer to do this for me and bring it all together. But hang on a second, you're £2,000 more than somebody else. That's because the values are not being recognised. You want an engineer, you want engineers electrically and mechanically to be able to deliver all these systems. That costs hundreds of thousands of pounds of investment into their training plans. And then it comes down to, hang on, you're competing against, so you're working with the costs of the day against engineers of yesteryear. And again, people aren't valuing properly. When we provide a tender these days, we provide a breakdown of everything we are doing, everything we are providing for our clients to use as a checklist against everybody else. Because often people are winning it because they aren't including everything. They aren't saying what they're not including. So we actually give a full breakdown of everything that we do so people can say to somebody else, have you done this? Have you got this? Have you got this qualification? Can you do this? And going back to Gareth, what you just said, we've just set up a new business called W360, Wellbeing 360, and that is about reporting all of the building's performance. Very shortly, the SME sector, as well as the larger sector, are going to be involved with ESG reporting, and decarbonisation, and penalised for not following those plans. What we've done is automated that ESG ability, but that's going to be driven down via legislation from the government, which is going to cost all the SME sector, local authorities, every other landlord of every type. It's going to cost them an awful lot of money if they don't start following these things. There's a new British standard coming out next month, which we were involved with, BS 40102. It will affect Elvid, it will affect everybody else. We are seeing people now in the built environment suing their employers for the poor environments they're working in. The case law that was brought up by Ella Kisser-Deborah, actually on her death certificate, was written about the environment she lived in, was causal to her death. We are going to see a great change in our buildings and the environments that we work and live in. And if we don't start doing something now, it's going to cost us all dearly in the long term. And the Welsh Government, in all fairness, with the Future Generations Act, are doing their best, but we need to do better.
Thank you, Dave. This has been an incredibly exciting conversation, and I know that anybody watching this is going to have lots of input as well. Chris, just come to you.
Yeah, so I mean, well, we've covered so much ground, I don't even know where to begin, but this, like I say, it's a really exciting conversation to be involved in. And to touch on a few points there, so you just covered it, Dave, as well. I was just about to mention about Wellbeing Future Generations Act and the fact that we have a unique opportunity maybe to hold our public sector to account in a way that we don't elsewhere in the UK. I hope that that'll become something more common, as time goes on. But there's a real opportunity to actually use those metrics to really enact or at least encourage change. It seems as though it's something we could pursue legally, but whether or not people want to. I think there's a few things here that we've got to address, which are the expectation of buildings. So, why are we building buildings? The purpose and what are we trying to achieve? And I think that there's some things, this historic point of buildings being that they are somewhere to sit and do something and have to use energy, and when you start to consider a building as a generator, as a potential to or at least for itself to be self-sustaining and to minimize its grid impact and take that whole life cycle account of its energy, carbon sort of reduction or payback over a period of time. When I say the term value engineering, I say it without the inhibition of previous, the historical usage of it. So I mentioned it before we started recording and talking about it now. I said about, there's a place for value engineering. And what I mean by that is that once you can consider a building has the opportunity to pay itself back, that if you include that and actually prioritize its payback as part of the value engineering that you're taking, the process you're going through, what really changes is when you say that is fundamental to a building and you can't remove it. So what often happens is people will say, well, things like generating at PV, solar thermal, battery storage, those technologies, whatever it might be, there's a whole load of them. They're seen as nice to haves. So in reality, if a building has to have those technologies in order to be viable from a whole system perspective, then value engineering around them is necessary to meet the budget. Right. So the point is that it's about that perspective of what is essential and what isn't. And in my mind, and in Specific's mind, those items are essential and they should not be value engineered out. They should be value engineered around in order to meet a budget. So if that's the case, there's only so much you can do with that. And I appreciate that's a very broad sweeping term, but that's my philosophy on it.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks so much, Chris. Sorry to cut you off. This has been a very strong discussion and lots of priorities and issues shared. It's obviously something that's very, very, very close to everybody's heart. Just quickly, Nigel, did you want to come in, and then Dom?
I was just going to say, so to be fair to Welsh Government are driving zero carbon in operation very, very hard. They're driving all, so where we work with local authorities for schools and hospitals, they are driving as hard as they can. The clients, to be fair to clients, often want to be able to do it. Again, back to the education piece, they don't quite know how to do it, and they're reliant on their consultants and advisors to advise them the best way to do it. And as Chris has pointed out, that I think that would be a real step forward if somebody could identify to these specialist consultants, designers, what the must-haves are. So basically around the fabric first principle, that trying to get into the building integrated PV, the specific elements of using the building form best you can, rather than just sticking with the old applied later technologies. I think, as I said, with the Future Generations Act, well-being being built into the buildings, as Dave, I know, pushes hard. If you can build well-being into the building, then you take away a lot of the issues in terms of wasted energy as well. So I do think that the government is pushing hard from their end. My end, we want to do it. There's a gap in the middle that needs filling in from my point of view.
Thanks, Nigel. Engaging consultants is obviously a key point. Last word from Dom.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to sort of raise a key part of sort of any sort of net zero carbon target is going to be not only what we do with new buildings, but with the existing buildings as well, and what kind of regeneration and things are going to be required. I mean, whether people want to or they're forced to, there's going to be, you know, for example, in 2027, EPC target's going to go up from minimum from an E to a C for commercial. So in the building I'm in now, for example, Princess House, it will be no longer fit for purpose unless it's regenerated. So I think whilst the owner of this building is looking into measures to bring that up to speed now, again, it's sort of maybe whether that Welsh hub that's been talked about and coming in the year can include on not only construction of new, you know, materials to bring these sort of in line, it's also what can we do with existing, and how, you know, what's going to be the most effective stuff to sort of bring these old 1950s buildings, you know, into where we are in the 21st century. So yeah, I think I just wanted to add that in and maybe ask a question for Alfred, just to say, you know, what do Pobl do on existing owners, being one of the largest landlords of, you know, current stock. And it's all good to talk about sort of stuff they're building in the future, but what's happening on sort of existing ownership as well.
Existing building. Oh yeah, go Elvid.
Pobl's got funding from WEFO. I don't know how people haven't heard about this because it's kind of massive, but it's the single largest optimized retrofit program in the UK, I think, and it's happening in Swansea at the Penderry. We've got 650 homes that are currently being retrofitted as part of that program. We're working with Cerro and others to do that. I'm not directly involved in the delivery of that, but obviously I work alongside asset management colleagues and others and regeneration colleagues, and, you know, seeing as I've been the sort of primary author of our new build strategy, there are lots of tie-ins between the two in terms of, you know, a fabric first approach being the kind of bedrock, along with you know, with existing buildings. You know, you have to absolutely understand the construction and the fabric and the design, because there are so many different building types that to have a one-size-fits-all approach is a recipe for disaster. So, you know, we need to be able to share what we've learned, share good and bad experiences. I visited people in the first phase just before Easter, and you know, there were primarily good feedback. One or two people a little bit put out by the fact they had scaffolding on their house or contractors kind of traipsing in and out, but primarily people understood what was happening and understood that it was going to help not just save them money, but, you know, address climate change as well. So there's lots of good practice, and maybe we need to be more sort of communicative about what we're doing.
And share with us, Elbert, isn't it? You know, for the region, as Jane has mentioned, that sort of one-stop shop. While we're not quite there yet, I hope that for the region is an avenue for all of you to be able to share your good practices for whenever, you know, we're driven by our members. You're all members of ours, and all your sort of issues, challenges or opportunities that you guys face, hopefully that we can bring people and businesses together to sort of co-create solutions to things and be that glue that brings everyone together. I hope you guys all see the value in what For the Region can bring. I know that by attending these meetings and talking so much with great passion really shows the drive of everybody. Is really exciting, and thank you so much. We'll be pulling everything that everybody said into a report, which will also go into our Green Recovery Business Report for the conference that we held the other day. And we'll be picking out some of the points from today's conversation. We'll be happy to bring back together with others as well that maybe might not be connected to For the Region at the moment, to bring in more people and businesses to share ideas about some of the challenges that we face, or again, the opportunities. Thank you very much for joining us again. We really appreciate it. And we'll look forward to seeing you again next time.